Hi class. Today we're starting Unit 1, Fundamentals of Economics, and today we start pretty easy with basic principles. And this today begins our formal lessons on economic theory. So today's learning goals are to know how to make and graph economic relationships, be able to make and interpret economic relationships, and understand why and how economics is studied. And so you should be able to graph by the end of today's lesson, complete your homework. And so if you've done all those things, it'll show you good success in today's lesson. So we want to figure out why are we studying economics, right? We're looking at making decisions. And so if I were to ask you some questions like what type of phone you have, most of you will probably say iPhones. Some of you may say Samsungs or Androids. And so I can ask you why. Why did you choose that thing? And so many of you may say because of iMessage or price point or it's better. But saying it's better is a fairly qualitative kind of thing, and you can't really prove better or not, right? So you want to wonder, why would you make that choice, right? Two is, would you rather spend money or save? So some people are spenders, some people are savers. Some people, if they got $1,000 today, may choose to spend it all, or may choose to put it all away for university or college next year, right? So everyone sits in a different space in terms of what is their spending versus saving habits with found money. And so also, if I ask you the question, after high school, what are you planning to do? Most of you are probably going to say university, and then I will ask you why, right? What is pushing you toward that goal? Some may say you get a better job, and then I might ask you, what does a better job mean? Some might say you might earn more money. Maybe that's possible, but definitely not guaranteed, right? So we want to evaluate, why are you making these decisions, and what's going into making these decisions. Another one, cook or eat out, money saving, enjoyment of cooking, all these kinds of things. Are you a procrastinator, or do you do your homework right away? Again, all these things are choices that you have to make and that you do make on a regular basis. And so understanding that there are choices and what those choices entail is part of this economic thought. So all these choices are decisions. And so the question now is, why are we making decisions, right? Because every decision you make is an economic decision. And so many of you may not even know what economics is. And so how can you be making economic decisions if you don't even know what it is? And so I'm going to argue that it is part of all of your thinking, subconsciously, consciously. Even if you don't know what it is, you're still making economic decisions. And so here's why we are forced to make decisions. So why do you have to buy an iPhone or an Android phone, right? Why not have both of them, right? Some people are going to say money. Why can't you travel next year versus go to school next year, or all these kinds of things? So what's making you make that decision? The decision ultimately lies in the fact that you have limited resources, you have limited time, you have limited money, and you have unlimited wants, right? So ultimately, if you would offer me a free iPhone, I would take it. I have an Android already, but why would I not take it, right? If it's free, right? But if I wanted to buy one, that's a whole different story, right? Because my resources are limited while my wants are unlimited. And so the choice is between scarce resources, time, money, versus unlimited wants. We always want more, 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 clearly, right? So if I asked you, when was the last time you bought a new iPhone? And then if I asked you why, was your old iPhone broken? Was it obsolete? Some people buy a new iPhone every time it comes out, right? So your resource allocation that you have changes what decisions you have to make, right? Obviously, wealthier people have more resources in terms of money, and so they may be able to buy more things, right? And so these are economic choices because we have scarce resources and unlimited wants. So ultimately, our economic decision-making lies in the fact that we have to decide which of these needs and wants we will satisfy with our limited resources, right? And so I have to choose, what am I going to do today for lunch, right? Am I going to go to Fortino's and buy a pizza? Am I going to bring lunch from home, which is going to be cheaper? I'm going to go to the cafe. All these kinds of things. We're forced to make decisions, right? And so those decisions are done economically, right? We're weighing our options. So we're studying this way of thinking, and so we want to kind of look more into some theory and some terminology. So if we're going to study economics, we need to understand what it is versus what an economy is. And so economics is the study of the way we make decisions about the use of scarce resources, which we just talked about. And so we're going to study and figure out, why is this person choosing this choice? Why is that person choosing another choice? Why is a government choosing to tax this much? Why is the government choosing to impose tariffs? All these kinds of things are parts of the study of economics, right? And an economy is a self-sustaining system in which many independent transactions create distinct flows of money and product. So Canada is an economy. The world is a globalized economy. There are smaller economies. There are larger economies. And so an economy operates to satisfy and to help us make decisions on these scarce resources and unlimited wants, right? Transactions with cash, products, these are the economic decisions that people are making within an economy that they live in. So we have to figure out, what do these decisions mean, and what are we trying to accomplish when making these decisions. So we want to look at two terminology, two vocabulary: effective versus efficient, right? And so we want to be economic. We want to be effective at what we do, and also efficient at what we do, right? So to be effective is to accomplish something, right? To get the job done, right? So to achieve the results that we want, right? But that can't be where our way of thinking ends, right? If we want to achieve the desired results, great, right? I could build. I was looking into the Sky Dome, the Rogers Center. For those of you who don't know what the Sky Dome is, right? So the Sky Dome was built many years ago. I think their first original budget was 150 million. It ended up ballooning to 600 million dollars, right? Did they effectively achieve what they wanted to do? Yeah, they built the Sky Dome. It was at the time a state-of-the-art facility. Yet they wasted a lot of money. They didn't get contractors in the right ways. They did not utilize the methods that would make that thing more profitable, to make it more efficient, right? And so efficiency is to use the bare minimum of resources necessary to accomplish said desires, right? So we want to be both effective and efficient, right? I want to get there using the least amount of resources. And why do we want to do this, right? Because we have scarce resources, right? If we're able to be efficient, we can utilize some of those resources on other things. And so if we're not efficient, then we're just wasting the resources that are limited. And that poses problems for us to make decisions on what we can purchase, what we can produce, all these kinds of things, right? So understanding what effective versus efficient is important. So I just mentioned that being efficient allows us to use our extra resources on other goals, because we want to achieve different things with extra resources. Imagine your time, right? If you are studying for a test, yet you have your computer on, your phone on, all these kinds of things, it may take you an extra hour to study for that test because you're being distracted, right? I'm sure all of you have done this, where you read a portion of your textbook or your notes, and then at the end of the page, you don't even know what you read, so you have to go back and read it again. That's not efficient. It's not an efficient use of your time. And so you want to be able to be effective and efficient at the same time. So when we're talking about effective and efficient, we want to utilize a term like economize, right? So to economize is to use your resources wisely, to allocate the money in the right way, right? And so if I was to talk about the Sky Dome again, I'm not sure if you guys understand, but the Sky Dome was funded by lots of public taxpayer money, right? And so the question is, why are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars on taxpayer money to build a stadium, whereas we could use that money for education, healthcare, whatever it may be, right? So are we using our resources as wisely as we can? So we always want to economize, right? And so economics helps us to achieve the quote-unquote right goals, to be effective, in the right way, to be efficient. And so I would ask you, what do I mean, or why am I putting quotation marks around right? Right, that decision to choose what you want to accomplish versus how you want to accomplish it. Some people may think that the best idea is to build this new condominium, right? Is that the right thing? I don't know. Some people might choose to use these contractors in the right ways. But is it the right way, right? So right is very subjective, right? Depending on who you talk to, right? So we have to understand that economics is not a exact science, because it is behavioral. It is people's beliefs, people making judgment calls on what to do, how to do it, in which way. So another concept we want to look at is opportunity cost. And so opportunity cost is a fundamental concept that we need to understand very, very well, because it talks to our need to economize. It talks to our need to use our resources wisely, to choose what we do with them. So with opportunity cost, you're looking at a concept where it talks about what is the opportunity that I'm giving up. Okay, so what's the cost of opportunity? And so the definition is the sum of all that is lost from taking on a course of action over another. And so what's your opportunity cost right now of taking economics, right? Your block B economics class or block C economics class, or whatever block that you have, you're choosing to take economics, and you can't choose another course because it's at the same time slot. So that is lost, right? If you choose to buy a Big Mac combo, the opportunity that is lost is potentially buying a McChicken combo, or potentially buying a booster juice, or potentially buying socks, right? Anything that you could have bought with that money or done with that time is the cost of the choice that you ended up making, right? So you have to make sure that you understand that every choice that you end up making, there is a cost to that choice. And so you're using economics to figure out, why am I choosing this one over the other one? And again, you won't have thought about economics when you're making those choices, but you are doing economics in your brain when you're making those choices, if it's just even subconsciously. So as we talk about economics and as we do economics, understanding all this terminology is very, very important. But economics, not as much in this course, but as you study economics further in life, it is going to be a very technical, empirical study. You'll run across terms like econometrics, and so you'll want to know how to deal with the empirical evidence. And so that's why graphing is very important in economics. And so if I showed you this graph, you could make some very simple conclusions right away, probably. Right, you can see that we're looking at what is the relationship between price of ice cream cones versus how many ice cream cones are going to be sold in whatever marketplace this is, right? And so if you look here, you can see at $3.50, 10,000 ice cream cones will be sold, right? At 50 cents, 70,000 ice cream cones will be sold, all these kinds of things, right? And so you have to understand how to graph and how to read that graph. And so those two very important things, plotting coordinate points, X and Y. You should all have done this already in some form, in some classes, math classes, science classes, whatnot. And so, again, it's extremely important. I'm going to expect that you can do it. But if you can't, and it's difficult for you, I implore you to seek my help, and I'll help you learn these skills, because we don't want to get too far behind in some of these skills that I'm going to expect you to know how to do, right? So if we look at graphing, we're graphing price versus quantity, and so you wanted to understand and make some conclusions, right? This is a negative relationship. The slope is negative. It's going down, downward sloping, which means that as one of the axes or one of the things goes up, the variables goes up, the other will go down, right? So as this increases, quantity sold decreases. As prices decrease, quantity sold increases. That is a negative relationship because it is a negative slope. Okay, and so that's one thing. The next thing is, what if cones were $5, right? Can you interpret the results of this graph, right? So if you look at this graph, it's linear. If you keep on drawing this to $5, you're, negative cones, but basically you'll sell 0 cones. You won't sell any cones in that situation, right? So this is a simple graph, but you need to know how to interpret it. You need to know how to make them before we go on, okay? So that's why we're going to practice this in a moment. So the next thing we're going to do is go to the textbook, and so we're going to go to page 11 and 12 of your textbooks, and we're going to do the activity called Thinking Like an Economist, complete the reading, and do the questions 1 to 5. So if you take a look here, I've just toggled to the textbook, and so this is the textbook, Chapter 1, Basic Principles of Economics, page 11, Thinking Like an Economist. Okay, and so I want you to read through this, read about this graph, look at this chart, look at these charts, and then end up answering questions 1 to 5. Okay, so take a moment. We're going to stop right there, and we're going to work on this. And so if you are watching this at home and you are thinking what to do, pause the video, open the text. It's posted on Edsby, and go through that activity. Okay, so go through that, and then we will take it up. So hopefully now you've unpaused, you've taken some time to work on that, and so we're going to go on and kind of make sure that we know what we're doing in terms of graphing from that information. So just from those 3 points, X, Y, and Z, you're going to be able to look at and plot a chart. So if I describe this chart right now, I've placed quantity, number of cones sold, on my x-axis, and temperature on the y-axis. So I plotted my points here. And so then I just did a line of best fit. So I'm not expecting you to have this equation right away. It didn't ask you to make the equation, but I just want to show you how technical this can be. And so I did this in Excel, and so I plotted these points, I drew my line of best fit, and then I did an analysis and got an equation of a line. And so what does this mean, right? Y being the temperature, X being the number of cones sold with this formula. And so if you answer the questions, you're going to look at if temperature is 38 degrees, so if we go up here above the graph at 38 degrees, the number of cones sold will be something. So 38 degrees is the Y, 0.0004x, which is the number of cones, plus 4. And so if you look at the graph, you could eyeball it. You know, you draw a line here, and it's going to come up to here somewhere, and it's going to be, you know, in the 80,000 range, right? So, but if we use our formula, we can do it exact, right? So X will equal 85,000 cones, right? And so at 38 degrees, we're going to sell 85,000 cones based on this line of best fit, based on these 3 points that we have plotted, okay? And so you need to be able to understand how the graph works and why it's useful in making predictions, right? So if we know this information, we can predict how many cones to make, to sell, to prepare for the rush, right? Because we know what the temperature is going to be. So next question, if the temperature is 8 degrees, so somewhere down here, the number of cones sold is 10,000, right? So it's going to be around here. And so I didn't show you the formula again, but that's where it's going to be. If you plug these values into the formula, 8 degrees, you'll get 10,000 cones. Question number 3, if I want to sell 35,000 cones, what does the temperature need to be? So I'm down here, 35,000. I can look 35,000 up to the graph, and then across, our temperature needs to be around 18 degrees, right? So you can use the graph across the X and Y axes to find out, eyeball it, ballpark it, what it should be if you don't have the formula. But I have the formula, so I can be exact. And then the question number 4 is, sales will go to 0 if the temperature is 4 degrees. So at what point are we going to get the quantity to be 0, right? And so again, we're doing the same thing. We're plugging into the formula. We're plugging 0 for our X coordinate because 0, X is the number of cones, and we want to see 0 cones, right? So this hopefully kind of verifies that you can do it, or verifies that, yes, you need to get some extra help from me and to figure out how to do the graphing, because we do not want to go into the next unit with not a strong ability to graph and to interpret graph, right? The graphing in itself is, functional. Interpretation of the graph is much more important, actually. So, and the last question is, this is a positive slope. The previous graph we looked at was a negative slope, and so the positive slope of the line indicates a positive relationship, meaning when one goes up, the other also goes up. And so that is the Thinking Like an Economist on page 11. Please ensure that you've answered these questions and that you know how this works. Again, if you don't know how this works, please send me a message and I'll try to help you out as much as possible. So, because we've done that, the last thing I want to do is to look at the scientific method. We're not going to go through this that much, but I just want to identify that um, economics is scientific in nature in terms of we're testing things, we're testing thoughts, theories, and just like science and doing labs and whatnot, you're testing theory, right? So the scientific method does exist for economics, right? So the first thing is to observe something happening, right? What's going on there? Why am I noticing this change is different? And so you're trying to figure out why. What's the question? You're trying to answer problems like what's going on here. And so that's the first step. And the second step is to collect data, right? You need to get information to make a conclusion, right? So we collect data, all the information we get from Stats Canada, whatever, any data points that you could find, like what's happening, why is this going on? Record this data, and then look into this data to see what's going on, right? And so the next is to explain. So we want to figure out what is this data actually saying to us, right? We've collected it all. We want to analyze it. We want to look at it. What does the data tell us about the answers to our original questions that we're observing, right? And so we want to reach a conclusion from this data. And so then after we explain something, we're going to verify, right? Test our hypotheses to explain a forecast, reject, modify, accept the hypothesis. But again, we're talking about like questions that change. And so hypotheses are not really about getting truth, but it's more about, or not getting about proof, but it's more about accepting that thought, accepting that theory, or saying, you know what, that theory is wrong, so we're going to reject it, or changing it and reassessing, reevaluating. And so when we talk about that data, I want you to think about like everything that you do is data nowadays with technology, right? Every social media site, every Uber pickup, every time you use Google Maps, all that's data, right? And so that's why data is so important. The information that these technology companies are gathering is so valuable to making conclusions about what to do next or whatnot. So that's why there's a concept called big data that we want to look at, that we are definitely trying to understand better. And like lots of these companies, like Uber is a ride-sharing company, but it's a data company because they collect data. Think about Ancestry.com, right? It's cool. Oh, what's my ancestry, right? I guarantee you they are using that information, or they're just gathering as much information as possible, and they are going to sell that information, right? It's not going to be specific to you, but they're going to be able to make conclusions from that data. So data is extraordinarily important and it's valuable in our economy. So that's lesson one. And so we just covered some basic principles. So I don't think not a too heavy lesson, but please make sure that you look at your notes package and do the homework. And we'll take the homework up in the next lesson. And so send me messages to let me know if you have questions or you are having trouble with something. But that's lesson one. And hopefully that went smoothly for you. Thank you.